Hi, Year 13. Sorry I was so rudely cut off before, lacking in memory. So here we go for what I missed out on the previous bit. So this is part 2. So I left you having talked about the diagram and the graph here and also the table. And we said what we're going to say about those things. But we've got to put some context in that in terms of our biological knowledge. Okay, so when we go back to this, the key thing here really for the biological knowledge is that this bit here, this synapse. So why is it that the impulse can continue to get to X but not to Y? Well, because there's a synapse in the way, and that's how habituation works. So for our marks here, we need to talk about the idea that if we repeat the stimulation, then the impulse stops traveling across the synapse. Okay, why is that? All right, well, effectively the neurotransmitter stops being produced. All right, or not enough neurotransmitters being produced, and therefore from the synapse we know that if we don't get neurotransmitter diffusing across that synaptic cleft, then we don't get calcium channels opening, and therefore we don't get sodium ions entering, and we don't reach our threshold for our action potential to be produced. So we need to get that in with our data. And if you want to get 6 marks on this question, you're going to have to say something about this table, something about this diagram and this graph down here, and relate this to the biology, okay? If you just simply talk about this and this, you're probably going to pick up about 3 marks, but we need to see some biological context behind what you're actually talking about, okay? So, last but not least, we've got a devised question, our favourite devised question. Oh, that's the wrong one. So, here we go. Devise. So, as soon as we see devise, I'm thinking IV, range, DV, how, CV, at least 2 of those, okay, and potentially repeats, all right. You might think about stats, but that's going to be more of perhaps the 6-mark version of this. All right, that pen's not great, is it? Let's just change to one of my daughter's other ones. All right, so if we now look at this, okay, if we talk about our IV and a suitable range, all right, now what is a suitable range? We're always going to talk about 5 different frequencies, but we've got to relate that to the question, all right? So devise an experiment to show that the frequency stimulation used in the first study should be 20. All right, so that means that you're not going to do anything. You're going to try and prove that it's 20. So you're going to need to have some that are less than 20 and some that are greater than 20. So a range of 5 in and around 20, I would say. Okay. But we do need to see some above and below, because if you do it below, then it could actually mean that it should be 30 or 40, and you don't know that. Okay. Now, dependent variable is the level of habituation. Okay, and we need to always have a how or a way of measuring that. Okay, now with habituation we can simply just observe, but it would be better to be talking about some sort of measurable dependent variable, and we've got a clue in the previous question, because they've talked about the length, haven't they? The length change. So that's how we're going to do that. All right. We've mentioned also this idea that we're going to repeat. All right. And we're going to repeat. I'm going to use similar size or similar species. Okay, to try and get different answers, all right, and then that we can then make that a reliable, repeatable test. And last but not least, we haven't talked about our control variables here, all right. So what are we going to think about with our control variables? Now, we've talked about species and size here with this repeating situation, but the biggest issue here, all right, with control variables is the touch. So if you smash one as hard as it can, and then you touch the next one really lightly, and then you give the next one somewhere in between that, in terms of a poke with a cotton bud, that's not going to be a valid test. So we need to have some sort of way of controlling that touch, either in terms of the position of it, okay, and certainly in terms of the force of it. All right. The other thing we could look at potentially controlling here might be like how much time you're going to give them between each touch. Because again, if you touch one every 10 seconds and then a different one, you touch it every 20 seconds, then that's going to have an effect on the habituation. But this is important here for your devised questions, all right? As a bare minimum, you need to be writing about that. Now, if this was a 6-mark question, they'd be wanting a bit more and it would be more relevant to what you're talking about in that question, okay? But there you go, that was my attempt at Key Assessment 3 for topic 8 in 2 parts. I hope you guys are well and I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.